I'm very happy because we have between the photo clubs that I send all the information to and Meetup, we have 50 visitors supposed to be coming today. So
Awesome.
James, I saw you someplace.
I'm one of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Yeah, and Les, I know you from someplace. So I'm going to get started because as people come in, these are just messages that I'm, the regular announcements. I want to start off by saying you're not going to see Carl Zucker tonight at the meeting because he's in the hospital with COVID. He's been there most of the week, pretty much the whole week. They thought he would be able to go home today, but they're keeping him till Monday, but he's been hit with whatever they can possibly hit him with, and he's doing very well, but they're keeping him a little bit longer. He has no idea where he got it. He's been extremely careful, and his whole family's been extremely careful with masks and where they're going and what they're doing. His family all tested negative. He's the only one that tested positive. Somebody needs to mute themselves. So I want you to know that usually, I send around a card for people to sign, but of course I couldn't do that. So I did send him a card from his friends at WPS, but his address is on the website. So if you want to send your own cards to him, he'll be more than happy to get them. But he's very hopeful and he is doing well, and he seems to be cheerful. So I thought I'd let you know that. Okay, we have two things on mentoring coming up. And one is a reminder that Joe Pollock is always available for setting up one-to-one mentoring on anything with photography for WPS members. So all of our guests are more than welcome to join WPS. And the other thing is on November 13th, we're going to be having our first breakout room for mentoring. Joe worked out conversations in each of the separate rooms of different cameras. So we're going to be having a person leading a conversation in Nikon, Canon, Sony, Olympus, and point and shoots. And all the information on that is on the updates. And if you need any other information, then contact either Dick on how to get in there, or Ron on how to get in there, and Joe for more details if you need more details. It'll be basically a person who's organizing the conversation. Even though the new In Focus or newsletter is coming out shortly, please do not stop sending Ron about 3 photographs of things you've taken during this time. It makes for very interesting things to see how far and wide we're photographing and how.
Let me just add something to that.
Please do.
Do it very soon because I'm almost ready to finish it up.
Well, what I'm going to say, Ron, on that, if you don't get it in time, they'll be saved for next month.
Right.
Okay?
Sounds good.
All right. Okay. Now, I got a call yesterday from at least one person who's still paying their dues. So I'm going to remind you guys, if you haven't paid your dues, please pay them. And you can either do it by check to the post office box, through PayPal on the Join Us page, or through Zelle. And the information is also on the Join Us page. And that's open to members and non-members alike. So anybody wants to join. There are 3 ways to do it, and the details are there. I don't have to give it now. On the website, when Ron updated it, he has a new way of doing the profiles on the membership list, which is open only to WPS members, but he needs each one of us to either create or update our own profiles. So if you've not done so, there are some details on the meetup, on the updates every week that Dick sends out. And if you still have a question, then just send Ron a note and he'll be more than happy to help you. Another thing we need your help with is questions about competition. And on this, you can send a note to either a board member or Dennis. The question is essentially, again, details are on the updates. It's where do we draw the line on what processing could be done in non-open mind and non-theme competitions? So we had a conversation about that, and Dennis would really like to have your input on that before we make anything, before we go any further. So next week, we have competition 2A. So you have to upload your straight color images and your open mind images by Sunday, October 25th at midnight. And I forgot to update what's coming the first week in November. Who remembers what's coming?
Don't.
It's an outside speaker.
Do you remember which one? Oh, that's right. It's the Wilkes. It's Stephen and Betty Wilkes.
There you go.
And they seem to be very interesting people. I'm very sorry. Things have been crazy here, so I don't have the exact details of what it is. They do not want me at this point to put it out on Meetup or to send out the information. So if they change their mind, I'll send that out. So I'm very sorry to all of our guests that we can't do it that way. We can't send it out officially, but they may or may not object to this. It's the same login. So if you look on our website and if you're interested, then you're welcome to watch it. Okay. So that's all I can say for new things. So I'm going to give Serge the floor to introduce James Maher. And again, James, I am very pleased. People are coming in like mad, and we have our own members plus 50 guests have signed up to come. And I look forward to meeting all of you. And I thank you very, very much for coming. It's a pleasure to see you and a pleasure to see some of you who keep on coming back.
Okay, let me just say I'm going to mute everybody, and you can unmute yourself when you have to talk, okay?
Okay, thank you, Serge. It's yours now. I don't see Serge.
I don't know whether Serge is here, but everybody's muted except myself, so. And James, you can unmute yourself when you're ready.
Yep, I'm gonna.
I don't see Serge. James, I'm sorry,
Yep.
I don't have your bio. That's Serge's.
Oh, I can do. Yeah, that's fine.
So I'm going to
if
ask
you're-
you to introduce yourself.
Mhm.
And I thank you very, very much for coming. And obviously, you're a big draw, so you got a lot to tell us. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It looks like it's an awesome group. It's a lot of people here today. I hope everyone's doing well. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, if you don't know, most likely you don't know who I am. I am a lifelong New Yorker. I've been a street photographer here since I picked up a camera. I do a whole wide range of things, everything from, portraits and events to documentary work. But, street photography and mixing that with city history. I'm a, certified tour guide and writing. I like to, bring that all together to tell different stories with my work, which we'll talk a lot about. Before I go into the presentation, I just want to show you the cameras that I'm working with, just, while you can kind of see me big. And then we'll talk about them a little bit more. I use a Fuji X100 for a significant amount of my work. There's a ton of amazing cameras out there for street that you can use, but I do really like the form factor. It's small and it works really well. So that's what I use for a lot of my work. I use a 35mm prime or a 50mm prime. I use them kind of interchangeably. Those are the only lenses I use 99.9% of the time, unless I'm doing like, commercial work or stuff like that. And then I also use a GFX medium format Fuji camera. And this kind of goes against everything I'm going to teach at the beginning part of the presentation. I'm going to show a different project that I did where I decided to use this camera, and I'll talk about, why I decided to do that. But just to see this, this is kind of a whole different thing. But, I love, even though I have no affiliation with them, I've helped sell a lot of Fuji cameras over the years. So I'm going to go and switch to share my screen. Let me share the presentation. Okay, here we go. Slideshow, play from start. Okay, here we go. So the presentation is an introduction to street photography from beginner to advanced topics. This is going to, pretty much cover everything I think you possibly need to know from the shooting aspect of street photography. There's, of course, the, editing aspect and the history aspect that I think are just as important to kind of learn. But this should get, everyone, most of the stuff they need to know to become comfortable over time with this type of work. I'm going to show my work throughout, some of my favorites. You're going to notice at first it's going to be a kind of, top hits, the ones that I like the most, some in color, some in black and white, not as consistent. As I go through towards more of the advanced topics I talk about, the work's going to get more consistent. You're going to see a few of my projects. Some of the early works are from these projects as well, but you'll see it's going to kind of have a much more consistent feel as we go through. And I'll talk about some of the images, and others I'll just, kind of leave for you to see. Sometimes you can't really say much about an image, depending. For this one of my favorite images, just to show you quick, how a facial expression, a look in the eyes can really carry an entire image. That's probably the thing I look for the most when I walk outside is I look at people's expressions. I try to see who has a great expression. Just to start off with, what is street photography? It's a really clunky term, so I think it's really important to talk about. And people have, different definitions of it, but this is mine. Street photography is candid photography of life, culture, and human nature. It's a way for us to show our surroundings, how we perceive them, and how we relate to them. And that last part is really important, how we relate to them and perceive them, because I think of street photography as kind of a mixture between kind of documentary work and personal work. Documentary work, the aim is often to kind of keep yourself out of it as much and just to kind of, show what's happening for other people to kind of give their interpretations of it. With street photography, we are actively giving our interpretations, we're putting ourselves into it. With that, the work becomes very personal, over time. And you can look at the works of great street photographers who have done this for a really long period of time. And you see even in different projects, some in color, some in black and white, some different subjects, you can really kind of get a sense of, the photographer behind the work when they've kind of developed their voice in that way. So we're filtering what we see to find moments that intrigue us. And really important is it's not just on the street or in cities. It can be done anywhere, and people do not have to be present. So when people think of street photography, they of course think of, New York City, Fifth Avenue, crazy people going by. And that's a big aspect of it, of course. But just as big is, you can do this in suburban areas. You can do this all over the place. Technically portraits aren't technically street photography, but they're a big part of the genre. And I think that's why it's really important to look through kind of, street photo books and learn about the history, because you really get a sense of the wide range that you can take this genre in. Here's an example of a portrait that I did that works really well with a project I'm going to talk about called Lux City later. When I do my portraits for this type of work, I always try to capture kind of moments that feel like they're candid. Maybe a moment where they don't know necessarily I'm taking their photograph, they kind of think or something like that. I'm always looking for those little moments. So you'll notice that kind of trend in a few of the portraits I show you. And of course, it doesn't hurt if your subject happens to have the Louis Vuitton logo tattooed on their head. I like consistency with different photographs and sequencing and stuff, which we'll see more later, but I like to show these two together. This is a bathroom wall in a touristy place in Manhattan. And it's really fascinating to kind of read all the notes that they wrote, kill the rich, eat their young. This was a while ago, but I can't breathe. Cody Peed here. It's very important. Ethics, laws, and most importantly, don't be a creep. Just to give you a sense of what you can do with this type of work. It's legal in the US and UK for artistic and educational purposes. You can, I think of it as if you're a painter and you made a painting, how would you be able to use that painting? You could sell prints of it. You could put it in a book of artwork. You could promote a show of your work with that photograph. You could put it online. But you couldn't use it for any commercial or advertising purposes. You can't use it to sell a product without commercial release of the person in it if they're recognizable. You can't advertise anything, and you can't insinuate anything about a person. You couldn't use it as a in an article about something that might insinuate something about that person. Of course, for different countries, when you're traveling, there's a lot of gray areas with laws. So read up on the local laws. But also look at the work of other street photographers and see what they're doing, because some places, it's not necessarily legal to do this type of work, but people still do it. There's so much gray area, and really, street photography is legal in public places, anywhere on the streets and things like that. So technically, it's not so legal if you do it indoors and in businesses and stuff. That being said, I mean people do it all the time in businesses and indoors and publish books of the works. And there has yet to be a problem that I've known of. So it's important to know that. You always, of course, want to be smart and respectful about who you photograph. And it's not always worth it to take someone's photograph. You're really, part of the thing is picking and choosing who you're photographing. And I'll show you how I like to approach it. I approach, the way I photograph in a very pleasant way, where people really, tend to not notice, but I still am able to get close. And it's important to notice.
You a question about
Sure.
That? Yep. Well, a couple of questions. So you don't get releases from anybody. Is that what you're saying?
No, it would be too much to just get releases. Right. Yeah.
I know. I agree. So my questions are, what about, you say it's not illegal. What about invasion of personal privacy kind of things, claims like that? There's a court case. I forget the name off the top of my head, but no, if you're in public, there's no right to privacy in public in the US and UK. So you're allowed to take photos of anything, as anything that you can see from public property. And what if you, okay. So if you're shooting through the window of a business, that's okay.
Yeah, there's this this was on the creepier end. I don't know if you guys remember, there's that photographer who just photographed this new building, all the windows from his window. And he just stared out the window with a long lens, like a really long telephoto lens, and then did a whole gallery show of just the people through their windows. And that caused a lot of controversy. It's legal to do that. That's a little you might get in a little moral trouble from that, but yeah, it's legal to do that.
So you're saying as long as you don't you're saying you can take money in an art show, for example. Mm-hmm. You just can't use it as part of advertising. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
You can use it for artistic purposes, but not for any commercial or advertising. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. And I forgot to say, anyone can feel free to ask questions if they want during, but I'll stop halfway through to do questions, and I'll do questions at the end as well, if people want to do that.
James, perhaps
yep.
I can add something to Lewis.
Sure.
Lewis, when it comes to photography, there's what's called reasonable expectation of privacy. And what happens is if you're out in a public place, such as New York City, the streets of Chicago, anything like that, there's no reasonable expectation of privacy. Now, if you were to use your telephoto lens to photograph in somebody's house, that could be considered an invasion. And of course, misrepresentation, like James said, for using somebody's image to promote or sell a product or message. But if you're out on the streets, there's nothing to stop you. But I would suggest that because of the outbreak of First Amendment auditors, don't photograph anything that says no photography. So I just thought thought that might help.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, and there is.
I'm sorry, I have a question.
Yep.
I'm just curious, do the benefits that you achieve from doing this work outweigh the potential dangers and risk of being accosted?
For me, yeah, by far. I'll talk one of the things I talk about is, the way that I shoot. Some photographers are very aggressive with how they shoot. And I do this because I like people and I like culture and I want to kind of share my thoughts about it. And I love the city and its history. And so I think it's a really important thing to do. But the way that I've learned to shoot over the years, I have not had, and I'm out there all the time. I've not had one person stop me in about 5 years. So, with other people, I mean, it happens more frequently depending on who it is and stuff like that. And people, way back, I used to get stopped more. I always just, this is part of the presentation, but I always, whenever someone stops me, I'm just honest about what I'm doing. And I've always, any bad situation I've been able to diffuse by just saying like, hey, sorry to make you uncomfortable. I'm doing a project on the streets of New York and I thought you looked amazing. I'd be happy to send you the photograph if it turns out to be good. But if they seem uncomfortable, I'll just say like, I'm happy to delete the photograph. And that for me, that's always worked. Of course I avoid shooting people that like look like they would kick my butt if they, or they look like it's not the right person to photograph. And it's never, I've never had a situation where someone's asked me to delete a photograph and it's been the best photograph of my life. In that case, I'd probably run away if I was faster than the other person, but I haven't been put in that situation yet.
I'm sorry, could I just push it one step further? What about children?
Yeah, that's so children, that's each photographer has their own kind of moral about what they think is right to photograph. It's legal, you can photograph children. And I know photographers who will photograph everything. And they have a really sensible personality, and you look at their work and you're like, this is extremely tasteful. I know photographers who won't photograph children. I know photographers who won't photograph, homeless people. It's depending on the photographer. I mean, you're allowed to, for me, when you look at the history of street photography, back when cameras were always seen as special and the internet didn't make people nervous and stuff. I mean, a third or more of the most amazing street photographs are of kids. The ones that kind of say the most and are really, really fascinating. I will, if it's the right situation, and it's a great moment. I will certainly take a photograph of a child. It has to be respectful. Sometimes I'll be very obvious about it, and I'll look at the parent. Sometimes they're really quick moments. Like a lot of them are just, super like, oh my God, I saw the most amazing thing. I just take a picture and move on. And it's kind of instinct. And I'll do that. But I am very careful about shooting kids because you can get in a lot of trouble. So it has to be a really tasteful, great, wonderful moment and a situation where I think it's, worth it to take it. But, I understand why other photographers wouldn't. That's probably the toughest question with this genre.
I have another question.
Yep.
When you go out, do you have a plan or is it more, well, let's just see what I come up with and what I find?
So it's a mixture of both. I definitely keep open to whatever I find. And I got into this genre because I love to walk. But I have projects that I'm working on. And so I specifically, especially as I progressed, when I started out, I was more walking and learning what I was doing and figuring out what I liked. As I progress now more, I have I'll go out and I'll be shooting for a specific project and I'll be open. I'll be looking for whatever. Sometimes I have a Rolodex of types of images I want to get. Maybe today I want to work, I feel a little bit more outgoing. So I want to work on a little bit more portraits and meeting people. Other days I'm just I don't want to talk to a person. So I'll photograph backgrounds. Or I'll try, you'd be like, if I see this, maybe hopefully I can get this at some point. And that sometimes works out. So yeah, it's a mixture of everything. Yeah. All right. So I'll keep going. The thing it's important to know that street photography is a little creepy in the way that it is. That's how it is. You're photographing people without their permission. It's, when you know that, you think about how you're perceived and how you're out there, and the more self-aware you are, I think the more pleasant of experience you can make it for everyone involved. But it's just very important to be self-aware with what you're doing. I definitely don't feel bad about what I'm doing, but it can be uncomfortable sometimes. And the final thing is just when I work with photographers and do workshops and things and teach, sometimes I notice people, they'll see someone and they'll just
laser focus on them and photograph, and it just starts to get uncomfortable. So I just put this, like, you don't have to take 100 photographs of the same person. If a scene is developing, by all means, hang out, put your camera down, wait for the scene to move. But we're trying to, get people's photographs, but we're also trying not to make them uncomfortable as well. And there's a fine line between doing that the right way. So that's at least in my opinion. Here's a photograph of a local newsstand guy from where I used to live in the East Village of Manhattan, named Jerry. And this is a candid shot, even though he's looking at me. I saw the great cigarette out of his mouth, and I just kind of waited there and framed the scene, and I waited for the eye contact. That split second where he looks at you and notices you, but doesn't actually realize you're taking your photograph. I love those like first looks. So sometimes, I want the complete candid look. Sometimes I'm just going to wait for them to give me their eye contact, and in a few cases, it really works well this way. These are the major tips. If you kind of get these ones down, I think you can get a really far way there of getting good technical shots. The first one is to linger and let subjects come to you. As I mentioned, I like this type of photography because one of the reasons is because I love to walk and get lost and just to learn about the city by exploring. But I find one of the most important things to do is stop along the way where you find good light or really interesting things, or just even, if you see a really boring area and there's like no photographs there, sometimes I'll stop myself on purpose and I'll be like, all right, I got to try to get a good photograph here. And by stopping, what you're doing is since you're not walking around, you're more perceptive. You're already in position. So if people are kind of walking around, they're entering your personal space instead of you entering their space, and you're aware of people, a little earlier. So it really makes things a lot more comfortable. And especially if you're like really nervous at first, I think one of the best things to do is go somewhere where a lot's happening and just wait around and photograph. And, it makes it much easier. The camera snap is a super sneaky tip, which just works really well a lot. A lot of the time I just shoot really quickly. I have this camera and I just kind of snap, and it's so fast that people don't notice. But when I need to be candid, what I'll do is I'll hold the camera and take the picture. And instead of people's natural inclination, photographers' natural inclination often is to immediately take the camera away from your eye. You kind of shoot and take the camera away from your eye. And that's like the only way they know you've taken their photograph, unless they hear the shutter, which outdoors they usually won't. So I'll take the photograph and then I'll just keep my head in the camera until they walk through, or if they're standing there, I'll kind of look up first or look to the side. And it just looks like I was kind of like testing my camera out until I finally take the photograph. And that's like, you can get away with anything by doing that, really. Keep your camera up is another important one. Obviously, I've shot this for a long time with DSLRs and, zoom lenses and heavy cameras, and I do now with the medium format. So it's hard to always hold the camera up. But when I walk around and I'm really actively shooting, I try to kind of keep it around here. I prop one arm up with the other, and I just walk around like this. And it allows you to shoot quicker because even if you're nervous, you're not a nervous person with this, to get the camera from your belly to your eye, if something suddenly happens, it takes longer, it's clunkier, and it's way more obvious. So it makes you more uncomfortable. When I walk around with the camera like this, I see something, I can just go like this and shoot. I can even, since I'm using a prime lens, I can, I know what I'm getting. I can shoot from my chin. Really, I try to do from the eye whenever possible, but I do shoot from the chin a lot when I need to be candid. And it really frees you up to kind of photograph everything in a very quick way, so people don't really notice. Or at the very worst, they'll be like, did that guy take my photograph? I'm not sure. I'll keep walking. That happens sometimes, but not that often. The smiling, I put that in there because I think it's important to just act the part of being comfortable. If you look at videos of like really good street photographers who have done this for a while, it's amazing to watch like how they can get in the middle of everything and just shoot and shoot and shoot, and nobody notices them, or like they notice them, but nobody really gives them the time of day because they seem really comfortable, and because they seem like, since they're so obvious, they must be doing something okay. Whereas like if you're sneaking in the back with a big lens and looking uncomfortable and stuff, people are going to be much more apt to, wonder what you're doing. So, I'll get in the middle of things. I'll kind of just, I just look like I am having a good time, but I make myself even if I'm uncomfortable, I try hard to like make myself be as comfortable as possible. And I think that really changes the perception of how other people think of what you're doing. For all you fast walkers, walking slow is really important. There's some photographers I work with who always seem like they're trying to get to that next amazing location. And they miss so much along the way because it's not always about the amazing. A lot of times it's about the ordinary and the things you kind of overlook. And I feel like a lot of people overlook a lot of things by doing that. So I think it's important to walk slowly, and particularly if you feel like you're in an area where there's no good photographs, I think it's really important to stop yourself and force yourself to try to get a good photograph. Most of the time it's not going to happen, but when it does, it will be one of the best photographs you've ever taken. One of the things that I tell people as a practice, I think it's a good thing to just go out for a session of photography and pick like the most boring place you can think of. Go to like a Costco parking lot or something like that, and just like try to get good photographs there. And it's a really fascinating thing to do. It's hard. It doesn't always work out, but I think sometimes when it works out, you can get some really cool things.
Do you shoot everything with people in it, or have you just gone around and shot just scenes of the street, general street?
I missed the first part. Do I shoot everything with what?
With some person in mind as the central focus of the image, or had you done just simply street stuff without people in it?
Oh yeah, then that's something we'll talk about. It's street photography is not always about people. I think half of street photography is about people and half is about locations and backgrounds and things. So I shoot everything. And sometimes I think people, photographers, because they think street photography has to have a person in it, they're, more apt to kind of miss a lot of the stuff that are really interesting photographs because they're looking for only people. I do. I look at a lot of backgrounds, a lot of people, and you'll see as we progress through this presentation, there's gonna be more and more, talk about backgrounds and such. The final tip is acting. And when I say acting, I mean just a very subtle thing. It's just, you want to act like you're not photographing your subject. Instead of, I just make it look like I'm looking at the background. I make it look like I'm spaced out. And as a child of ADD, it's like pretty easy for me to do that. But I tend to a lot of times, as I mentioned, I shoot quickly, but instead of aiming, right at a person right away, if it's a situation where I might be uncomfortable, I'll aim up like I'm photographing a building. I'm like looking like this, and then I'll go take the picture, and then I'll kind of look back up at the building. It just looks like you're kind of lost in your camera. And it works really, really well, particularly if you're kind of just standing, if you stop yourself and stand around. You look like a tourist, you look like someone like a camera enthusiast who's just looking around. If you kind of play that part right, you really can photograph anything without getting, in trouble. All these tips are the reason why it's been about 5 years since anyone's even stopped me on the street to say, hey, did you take my photograph? It's just a pleasant way to photograph.
Do you ever use a flash or supplemental lighting, or is it too distracting and shocking to the subject?
That's a great question. So I have, when I was learning, I did try it to test it out and stuff like that. I don't like shooting with a flash for a couple of reasons. One is it's really confrontational, and I don't like the idea of making people uncomfortable when I photograph them. That's part of the reason why I want to be candid, so they don't know unless I'm doing like portraits, because I just want everything to be pleasant. So flash is really, it hits them, and you can scare people and stuff. There are a lot of great street photographers who use flash, and I love their work. But for me, it's too much. And I also I love the look in other photographers' work. You can tell he's like the mysterious look with flash, and it creates this kind of surreal feeling. But for me, I'd rather just the real moments in the natural light and having everything look like, I'd rather the specialness of the actual moment kind of shine through as opposed to the artificial lighting. So you're going to see some photographs here where, I'm going to show you where really it's a quick photograph and everything had to come together for me to kind of be quick enough to get it. So this is a quick one where, this guy was walking down the street and he happened to look down at the last moment. And I just saw this, amazing smiley face on the top of his head, but I would not have been able to get it had I not had the camera up here ready to go. My camera setting set, which we'll talk about. And I also was pre-focused to a certain distance, so I didn't have to focus, which we'll talk about later. So literally when I did that, photography just becomes about seeing a moment and taking the shot, and knowing you're going to get it most of the time, especially with a prime lens. So, really a lot of these quick, amazing moments that happen, if you're ready, you can get them. If there's some piece that's off, you're going to miss certain things. Overcoming fear. We talked a little bit about this with the questions, what to say if you get caught. I mentioned that, just, be honest. And, if you need to delete the photograph, legally you don't have to, but I think it's the nice thing to do. Street portraits are a great way to start. If you're uncomfortable, I think it's a good thing to go out and just try to take a bunch of portraits of people. And people get really flattered by it. So you'll kind of see that generally people tend to like that. So it's a good way to get comfortable. Picking a spot and waiting, as I mentioned, lingering is a great thing. Repetition is really important. So I think just going out as often as possible. And even, I tell people, like, this type of the work that you don't have to go into like New York City to do, and you should do other stuff. So I think really, like, what I do, I live in a kind of more suburban area of Brooklyn, completely different from like what my work looks like in Manhattan. And I'll show you that later. I do a lot of like 20-minute, 30-minute walks from my house in just kind of quiet suburban areas taking photographs. And I get some great stuff, in my opinion, just by doing that. And it keeps you fast. It keeps your photography kind of fresh. I think that's like one of the most, if not the most important thing for getting really comfortable with this kind of very fast moving form of photography.
I just have to ask, what part of Brooklyn?
Right by Greenwood Cemetery. So
okay. I grew up in Bay Ridge.
Oh, you did? Okay. Yeah. So
very picturesque neighborhood. Very beautiful.
Definitely. Yeah. And it's from where I am, a lot of the neighborhoods look so different. So I love to just like learn. I'm learning Brooklyn now by just getting lost in different areas. It's really cool. And the final thing is prime lens and small camera, which is not an overarching statement. You can do this with an iPhone. I've done this for a long time with a DSLR and a zoom lens. But I think one thing to really consider is a camera that it makes it easy on the repetition. Something small that, you'll take with you. I often shoot, if I'm going to like meet someone or going to a doctor's appointment or something, I'll leave 20 minutes early and take my camera with me. And that's how I integrate this type of photography in my life as much as possible. And I couldn't do that as much if I had a really big camera. This I just have in my bag all the time. And, with the small camera, obviously makes it easier to be comfortable with and for people not to notice. And the prime lens, it was really good for making you faster and more intuitive. When you don't have to worry about zooming and you know exactly what the scene's going to give you, it really frees you up. Someone told me a while back that it doesn't matter if you're using a zoom or a prime, you get the same amount of good photographs in the end. They just they'll look completely different. So you miss a lot of photographs using a prime. But really for street photography, generally the things you're photographing are within, 8 to 12 feet or 6 to 15 feet. And those are perfect for a 35 or 50 millimeter lens, which is why I use those most of the time. And I don't I try to switch it up. So I'll use 35 for like 2 or 3 weeks, and then I'll get bored with it a little and I'll switch to the 50. And I try to kind of keep myself off balance a little bit sometimes. Here's an older one with a zoom lens and a DSLR. With the bigger cameras, I think it's even more important to pick a spot and wait. Just, get ready, frame an area and wait for people to come into the scene. That works really well. Here's a photograph in a really kind of busy Fifth Avenue street where the crowd parted at the last second. And thankfully I had my camera kind of ready to go and, took this quick shot. And I just love this face, kind of looks like the Mona Lisa to me, like with that kind of half smile and like the look in the eyes. And it's a very powerful look, I think. Light, just a quick talk about light. I know, I'm sure many of you, because of the different types of photography that you do, know light very well. But light in street photography is a little different in that, when I do urban landscapes or other types of things, like I try to get there at the exact point of day, wait for the light to be perfect, bring everything together. With this type of photography, you don't often have that luxury. You have to know light and keep it in the back of your head, but you're spending so much of your focus looking for people and looking for the moments, and you don't know where it's going to happen. Is it going to happen in the shade or in the sun or behind you or in front of you? So you're really, while you have to know light and you kind of, think about it, it really is a secondary back of your head thought versus like kind of right at the front for other forms of photography. So things that I, definitely when I walk out the door and walking around, I do think about is how strong the light is, really important, the direction of the light, the contrast, of course, and is your main subject in the highlights or the shadows, which is like one of the ways I ruin my photographs a lot of the time, is getting that wrong. Is the light making interesting patterns? Can you have a really cool photograph because of the lighting and bring everything together with that? And where is light reflecting? I love to shoot in Manhattan. You have the bright white sidewalks in a lot of places that reflect light really well. So if people are backlit, their skin really kind of glows. It's really pretty amazing. So certain streets like Broadway and Fifth Avenue, especially, if you go at the right time of day where the sun's right in the middle of the street and you kind of walk towards the sun, you're just going to see, all these people shopping in opulent places and wearing opulent clothes, and the lighting is just going to make them glow. And so it all really works together. That's a really, really fantastic thing. And I love to shoot street photography at night. I don't use a tripod. I use this camera most of the time. What I do is I use high ISOs like 3200 or 6400. And I bounce from light source to light source. So really, no matter how high your ISO is, like if you're shooting at night without a tripod, there's certain shots you can't get. But what I'll do is usually it's storefront windows, and I'll stay close to the storefront. So the light will be bouncing off onto my subjects, and I'll be shooting the side that's lit of them. And so I'll go, find great lighting, and I'll just wait for something to happen. Then I'll go walk, a little bit to the next great lighting source. And that's how I shoot at night. And, with these cameras at this high, like this camera is incredible. You can see the noise, but it still looks beautiful at high ISOs. And so, yeah, when you get a great shot that way, it looks absolutely spectacular. And like something like this, you can't really, with the lighting, it worked out so well, kind of frame. But, I was lucky in that the lighting was that way. But, I took a handful of pictures kind of coming around. And so in the moment, I was trying to get the lighting as best I could. And in some situations it works out, and others it just completely doesn't.
Can I ask, there's a question in the chat that you might miss because you're being terrific here. Jared Dominguez, I hope I'm saying his name correctly. He asked, do you ever do street photography with a film camera? And do you have any specific tips for that?
I'm sorry, I can't help you out too much. When I first started, I definitely, I way back, I tried out, film, even some medium format film. Yeah, I went to digital as, I started doing this type of work in 2002, I think. And I went right to digital for primarily my work. Film is tougher because you have to be a little bit more, I tell people it's good to be deliberate with what you're doing. When people are learning, I tell them to shoot a little bit more liberally, get a little bit more loose, and don't worry too much. With film, it's great in that it makes you really think about every moment. But at the same time, you want to trust your gut as well. So, don't worry you want to not worry too much about the film to not take a quick shot. So it's, I would say it is a tough thing. It's a great thing to practice. I would try also, messing around with digital just to get your skills up a little bit. But I think film can really bring a very thoughtful process to the type of photography that a lot of people are lacking because they, jumped right into digital. As for specific technical stuff, I would say just use a higher ISO film. Just to make your life easier. And that way you can have, we'll talk about settings in a bit, but I would say higher ISO film is one of the easiest ways to just make the kind of whole camera work for you.
I have another question. Face with my photography is cataloging and filing them so I can find the images.
Yeah.
Obviously, you shoot a lot of images. Do you have a special cataloging or filing system so you can get to them quickly? How do you do that?
Yeah. So basically, I mean, when I enter the photos first into the computer, I go through and I will go through and give photos 0 stars, 3 stars, or 5 stars. The 3 stars are the ones I'm kind of not sure of. Maybe I'll go back to. 5 stars are the ones I'm pretty sure are really good. And then 0 stars are just, forget about them. And I delete all the 0 stars. So that keeps my archive much smaller than it needs to be. I mean, it would be otherwise it would be massive. Even though it is massive now. So then I also have them starred, so I have the best ones, and I use collections in Lightroom. Collections are the favorite part. I don't keyword. I always think, I'm like, keywording sounds like such a great idea, but it's just not something that I do. But it would be a good idea. There's some times where I'm like looking for an old photograph, and I'm like, I wish I had keyworded it. It could have been so easy. But I have a lot of different collections. And so my ideas, I do all types of work. I do urban landscapes. I do different things. And so I have collections for that. But my ideas, and we'll talk about this more later, I really, when I have an idea for something, I'll just create a folder for it, and I'll drag images into that folder and let that develop over time. And excuse me, it's really interesting to see those ideas develop and morph and completely change from what you first thought. So yeah, collections are the way that I typically do it. I have a whole file system and stuff on my computer, but I think collections is the way that I access the best photographs and catalog them.
When you said you'll be talking about settings, so Kenny Sahlstrom has asked, so when you get to that section, he wants to know how you handle exposure. Is it manual, shutter, priority, etc.? So
yep. I'll get to that. Yep.
Address that when you get there. Thank you.
Yep, certainly. Yep. Well, here's a photograph where I just had to wait for a taxi to kind of come by and illuminate the foreground to be able to take this photograph.
Had a homeless person in the previous photograph?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one. Yeah, it's a homeless person. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was in Manhattan Sunday, and I just felt I was talking to one homeless guy. I felt uncomfortable taking his picture. I didn't want to do it.
Totally. It's in general, like, I don't really photograph homeless people that often. One of my best friends, best photographer friends, Matt Weber, like photographs everything. He's been doing this forever. And, he does photograph homeless people, and he, gives them money, and he's very, caring about the homeless people in his area. And his work is incredible. And it's like, not like, it doesn't feel exploitative. But it's, like a photograph like this is something that I'll take. You can't like, you can't see the person. Maybe I've taken a couple, or I've definitely taken a few with homeless people where they're recognizable and stuff, but it's not something that I tend to do often or like to do. Like here's another of the type I would take. Now camera settings. So I'll go through this quick. I'm assuming you all know your camera settings pretty well, but for street photography, there's a specific way that I like to do it, which I think will work well for a lot of people, but not all. So you can do street photography in shutter, aperture, or manual. There are street photographers who have done this in different ways forever, and they do amazing work. I prefer not to use manual. It's just too much to think about. I like to have all my focus on the people, and I think aperture priority is what I use most of the time. And it really is, when you know what you're doing, aperture priority is like manual. What that shutter's about, what that shutter is going to give you depending on where you're shooting. So yeah, it gives you that flexibility to not have to worry about it as much, but you still know what you're getting. But there are photographers who shoot manual, and they just, in the sun, they're shooting, and then when they go to the shade, they're just automatically will change their aperture from 8 to 5 and 6 or 4, and they'll go back and it just becomes a second nature. But that's, for me, is a little bit too much to kind of worry about. So the lighting is just so different, especially in cities, but most places. There's a shady side of the street, a sunny side, shooting into the sun, behind the sun. You never know when something's going to kind of hit you and where it's going to be. And so that's why I think an aperture type setting will work really well. And shutter priority works great also. So I typically shoot aperture priority. I'll walk out the door, I'll look how strong the light is, and I'll set my ISO. And I use high ISOs. So if it's a sunny day, I'll probably be around ISO 400 to 800. If I'm on the beach, where it's sunny everywhere, I'd be like 200 or 400. If I'm in the city and it's a sunny day with big tall buildings, I'm on ISO 800, because even the sunny side, like right there, is going to be a whole big shady side of the street where the sun isn't hitting. And, you know, I always set my settings for the shady side of the street, because that way everything in the shade and in the sun will be sharp. And the only trade-off is that your ISO is slightly higher, which at ISO 800, nobody notices the difference between 800 and 400 on this camera. So sunny day in the city, I'll be 800. Overcast day, a little bit darker later on in the evening, I'm 1600. And then dusk into evening is 32 to 6400. You know, if you have kind of like a more entry level camera, maybe I would take it, instead of 64, I'd be at 32. Instead of 800, I'd be 400 or 640. But that's typically what I think works the best for me. I try to have as much depth of field as possible. I love street photography and how it looks with a shallow depth of field. I think it looks fantastic, but for me, it's not as practical. You know, those great moments only happen when they happen, and I don't want to screw it up. I'm so afraid to screw it up when I see something, because like it happens all the time, but there's nothing worse than you haven't gotten a good photograph in like weeks, and then suddenly you see the best thing and you screw it up, and you're just like, I'm the worst photographer in the world. So, you know, I'll walk out the door. I often start off about f8. And I typically, if I'm in the sun for a long time, I might go to f11, but generally I'm usually around f8. And as it gets darker, I'll go to f5.6. And then, you know, when you got to go to f2.8 or 2, then you got to do that. But I'd rather raise the ISO to keep the depth of field up. And the reason why I use decent depth of field is because a few reasons. One is the focusing. You know, it's hard. These moments happen fast, and it's hard to get the focus right. So if you're shooting at 2.8 and you miss the focus, you're going to screw up the shot a lot of the time. If you're shooting at f8, especially with a wider angle lens, and you miss the focus, there's a good chance the photograph's still going to be great. So it kind of minimizes your mistakes. And also, there are a lot of great scenes with multiple subjects at different depths, and you never know when you're going to get a shot like that. And so, you know, I always like to keep my camera set in case that happens. So I'm always trying to push the depth of field. And when I'm shooting at aperture priority, I'm always paying attention to my shutter when the light changes and making sure it's faster than 2/50th of a second. 2/50th of a second and faster is going to like guarantee your subjects walking are going to be sharp. 200th is okay. At night, I'm totally fine shooting at 1/125th or 1/80th. I mean, even 1/60th if you need. There'll be blur in some photographs, but it works a good amount of the time. But yeah, my day general number to have in my head is a 2/50th of a second with the shutter speed.
Before you move on, I have two more questions for you.
Sure.
Mark Friedman asks, how much, when you get to this point, could you include how much post-processing do you do with your black and white?
Mm.
And I'll ask you both questions and then you answer them whenever it's possible for you. Jackie Ross asked me a completely different question, which is, what now with COVID people? When COVID people are so stressed, how do you handle that? Thank you.
So both great questions. The COVID question, I'll answer later on in the presentation when I talk about the kind of quieter work that I do. That's a great question. So let's make sure to come back to that one. The black and white question is, I tried not to do too much processing. You know, I definitely do work on my photographs, but you know, I typically don't spend much time. You know, over the years, I've gotten fast at working with Lightroom and getting things where I want to get them to. And of course, if I'm making a print, I might do some fine tuning. But you know, I'm really going for like, I want the moments to feel real and special and unplanned. So I'm always just trying not to make sure anything looks too fake. So, you know, I'll punch up the contrast sometimes. I'll do different things. But it's not so significant, at least for the type of work that I like to do. Here's a shot in Soho, one of my favorite areas to photograph in the city. As this guy came up, I took his photograph and he saw me and he laughed and said, just please don't show my mom. But if you see here, because I had a decent depth of field, You know, I was able to capture him, but the background details are just as important. You know, this kind of all the mannequin, the bags, the woman cleaning here, the dress. I mean, it just adds to the whole scene of it. And so having everything sharp works really well there. I think it's really important to the photograph. Similar, you know, I love taking crowd photographs and trying to get really perfect crowd photographs. And this was shot probably at f11 with a wide angle lens. So everything is sharp throughout here. So it really allows you, you know, I'm sure I focused right around here, but if I had photographed here or here, I mean, it still would have been sharp enough to make it a good photograph. Now, the very important question, the most important question, what makes a photograph interesting? I have no idea. Sorry about that, guys. It's one of those things that, especially with street photography, I think the more you shoot, like it's when you start to figure out what you personally find interesting, what's personal to you. That's when you become on the path towards becoming a good street photographer, just for this specific genre. And that's why I was talking about repetition is really important. Like, especially when we were talking about editing and using collections, you know, I love, like, when I shoot, there's some photographers who are amazing at just thinking of a project idea, thinking of an idea and going out and shooting it. I like to just, you know, integrate photography into my daily life. And so I pick areas and I shoot them over and over again, and I start to figure out what I'm shooting. And I'll talk more about my projects later, but I let the ideas come to me, and I find photographs that I really like, and they might play off each other, and I put them into folders, and those folders change and adapt. And then I start to figure out ideas behind what I'm photographing. And then they really morph in, like, you know, sometimes they don't, but they really morph into concrete ideas. And I think that's a great thing. If you're familiar with Robert Frank and his book, The Americans, he loved to photograph items of Americana. You know, the American flag, the jukebox. I love to photograph, you know, if you walk down the street, you see coffee cups, cell phones, shopping bags, headphones. It's like the suit of armor to go outside these days. So it's something that is just very, it's everywhere, of course. So it's hard to get a good photograph that stands out, but I think it's really important to photograph because it says a lot about what's going on, especially in parts of Manhattan. You know, the headphone has had a really profound effect on New York. I think the most important thing about the city is, or one of the most special things about, you know, that when they talk about New York energy or whatever the heck that means, in my opinion, it's the idea that you can walk out the door any day and just have a completely amazing interaction with someone completely different from you that you do not expect just off the top of the bat, you know. But now you see all these people wearing these huge headphones walking around, and they're completely missing out on, you know, the thing that makes New York so special. They're going from place to place and completely tuning out. So that's had an effect on the personality of the city as well. Well, I said I don't know what makes a photograph interesting. There are, you know, certain things to think about that I think can help you get there. The first is the content and story. It can be as literal as creating a documentary type project, or like a more personal documentary type project. Or it can be, you know, more abstract, like, you know, creating a book that really has a feeling. Those ones are fantastic when they work. Just a lot of, you know, photographs that relate to each other in a way that, you know, maybe you couldn't exactly say why, but like you just feel that they all work together and it brings out something in you. Emotion and gesture. So as I was talking about the looks in people's eyes, the gestures in their bodies, I always look for people who are wearing their emotions on their sleeves. Those are who I'm most attracted to, like, photographing. And I'd much rather just a plain looking, everyday, doesn't stand out person with a really powerful expression than like the flashiest person, you know, with no expression at all. But of course, there's like a time and place for each in this. Form is really important, light, color, tone, composition. And some of the really great photographs are when you get lucky enough to get that all together. A lot of times, you know, the form will be totally, completely screwed up, but the moment will be so amazing that it just looks incredible. Other times that form will ruin the photograph. So there's really a play that you can't, you just kind of got to get lucky with it and work with it as best you can. And you know, these two, looking beneath the surface and interpretation and ambiguity. I think there's obviously those street photographs that just hit you right away and they're obvious and they're fantastic. But I think a lot of the stuff is great when it makes you think, when it's not quite as clear. And, you know, you can have a sequence that tells a little bit of a feeling of a story, but it lets the viewer do a lot of the work themselves. So I think that's something that's important to try to think about and work on. And consistency. The more you photograph this type of work, and the more you get to know what you like and the consistencies in your work, I think the better you'll get at this. And consistency is really interesting. I don't think of consistency as using the same lens or shooting in black and white or anything like that. I love consistency like that for photo books, like all black and white, same lens, you know, really tight book to keep everyone focused on the content. But if you look at photographers like who shoot in black and white or color or this or that, you can see their personality shines through no matter what they're shooting. And it's really an important thing. So that's something that I think gets developed over time.
I have a question from Arnold.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever pose people when you shoot?
I don't pose people. I'm going to talk about portraits when I'm doing portraits later on as well. I don't pose people, but I try to get them to pose themselves sometimes so that they feel comfortable. Here's a photograph with, I think it's got 36 different devices in it. It's been a while since I counted, but yeah, I think it's 36. Now, imperfection. And this is important to talk about because, you know, different genres of photography, like, you know, certain genres, landscape, it's like you're trying to get everything perfect all the time. When I do my, you know, cityscape scenes, I'm trying to get the perfect light and the great, you know, great place and make everything work. With street photography, imperfection is something that is really embraced. So I'll read this. A street photograph does not have to be perfect to be good. The nature of a good street photograph gives us a glimpse into a slice of reality, and perfection can ruin this feeling of realness because, of course, life isn't perfect. This is why grain, angled horizons, cut off people, or slight out of focus or motion blur are all very common in street photography. Sometimes imperfections will ruin a photograph, but other times they'll make it that much better. And you kind of don't know. It just happens when it happens. But like when I'm like working with different photographers, like I've had this happen a few times where someone will show me this amazing photograph and they'll just like be like, you know, I love this, but like I wish I hadn't have cut that guy's foot off. And was like, you know, I didn't even notice the guy's foot was cut off. Like the photograph is fantastic. I think you're definitely, you know, thinking too hard. In some cases, it's like something like that will kind of screw up the photograph. But in many cases, it's like, it just adds to the feeling that this was an unplanned moment. You could only do so much. And it happens to be an amazing moment. So, you know, definitely give yourself more credit and stop yourself from disregarding photographs because they have these imperfections. And sometimes, like, you know, you might want to even embrace the imperfections. You know, you might want to maybe get the focus not quite perfect to give a feeling, or off kilter with the framing or something like that, or cut off the person in a weird way. You know, those can have some incredible effects when done well.
Kenny asks, do you take one shot or bursts?
I do one shot. I know photographers who do burst, but I like to have control over the photographs that I take. For me, it feels right. And also sometimes with burst, I feel like you miss the shot in between the bursts, even though it's fast. You know, maybe it's not fast enough. And I don't want a million photographs at the same time. So yeah, I like to have control, but I know other photographers who do use burst and they like it. So if you're familiar with the work of Gary Winogrand, you know, a lot of his shots were off kilter, which I think was half spontaneous and, you know, half like, you know, he developed doing that on purpose. A lot of his shots were straight, of course, but, you know, it really adds, you know, technically it can allow you to fit more into the frame, more different parts of the scene by doing that, but it adds a lot of energy. There's a lot of diagonals. It makes it feel more unplanned and just a kind of a quick, you know, serendipitous moment. It has a really great effect. So yeah, I think that's a really important thing to do. Here's a photograph of someone taking a butt selfie. And if you look at the, you know, the lighting, it's, you know, blown out here. It's like not the sharpest thing here. It's a crop from a larger photograph. So, you know, there's definitely more grain. But I mean, none of that matters. Like it looks like it's a hot street. It looks, you know, I think it's an interesting moment. So none of that stuff bothers me at all. And as you can tell, there's sometimes I get the question, like, do you crop? Like, yeah, I'm fine cropping. I just want to get, you know, I won't clone or do anything like that to make the photograph not real. but I'm fine taking the photograph and doing any, like dodging and burning or stuff to make it look as good as possible. Here's a shot taken kind of at dusk where I didn't stop myself quite as much as I should have. It's of a hairdresser kind of with this fantastic face and the cigarette coming out of her mouth like that. And, I think it worked in my favor. It wasn't on purpose, but, the out of focus, makes it look more painterly. It kind of, feels more like a painting, and it really kind of highlights, this kind of cigarette. It makes it look like it's floating. And then of course it's completely off kilter. Combining elements. I say this because some photographers that I work with, I notice have like it's like tunnel vision, where they'll be looking right at people all the time. It's just people, and they'll just photograph that person or photograph this person. And all the photographs, tend to be exactly the same. And sometimes that photograph of just the person is the best thing. Sometimes it's the best thing to do. But I think it's good to try to have a peripheral vision where you really try to see as much as possible. So you see that person, of course, a lot of times you'll see it so fast, you'll just take the photograph, but you want to see the details in the backgrounds. And sometimes you also want to try to, especially if you have a second to think, maybe also look at the people coming into the scene, and can you combine that person with other people coming in? Because when that works out, you can have like these great scenes where multiple things are happening, and it's just really, really spectacular. And those are hard to get, but the more you think about it and the more you're aware of it, they come like when they come. Here's one where I was doing a portrait. And I similar to the Louis Vuitton one that I talked about, I waited for a moment where she didn't think I was photographing, and she kind of took a break for a second and kind of looked down, like it seemed like she was in thought. I really liked about her the cigarette, the cross, the filled notebook. And I noticed this other young woman walking down the street holding two things of coffee cups. And it felt like a perfect kind of combination. So I photographed the two together. When I do workshops, like group workshops, I actually have a competition every time of who can photograph someone carrying the most amount of coffee cups. And it's amazing in Soho what you'll get. I had someone within 5 minutes of the first day walking out the door photograph someone carrying 8 coffee cups. So that's been the record so far in a workshop. Here's an old one from Occupy Wall Street where each part of this individually I think would be an interesting photograph, but just combining the two together really kind of just makes it that much better. Similar to this one, I waited for the right taxi cabs to kind of come in the scene to complete the scene. It's funny with taxi cabs, it's a little bit less now. Like 10 years ago or like 8 or something years ago, 30 to 40 or more % of the tops of taxi cabs were for strip clubs. So sometimes that works great with the photographs you want, but other times I'd see people trying to take these classic New York shots that were beautiful with a cab in them. And they take it and they'd be so happy, and they get home and then they'd look at it on the screen and just be like a strip club right in the middle. And that wasn't exactly what they wanted. So just a funny thing. Setting a stage. It's a great thing to do to find a great area with great lighting and great backgrounds and wait for subjects to come in your scene and kind of complete the scene. You can create some like really spectacular photographs where people are like, how did you get that? And really it was just, waiting in a great location and hoping to get lucky. And the more you do that, the more chances you have to get lucky. This being said, this technique is overdone so much. Like, it's some people, like you just see people who find these wonderful backgrounds and they feel like they need to add a person into the scene to complete it. And so you'll see these great backgrounds and then just they're a random person that doesn't fit at all, just walking through. And that person like takes away from the photograph a lot of the time. If the person doesn't stand up to the photograph, if they're not interesting enough, just take a photograph of the background, because street photography is just as much about backgrounds as it is about people. So, just as often as you might wait and try to get someone in there, definitely take the photograph without it too, because a lot of the times that's better. Here's one where, I've been trying for like 7 or 8 years to get a non-cheesy photograph of like the steam coming out of New York. And I love bike messengers, so I always photograph bike messengers because it's a fascinating job. But I hadn't had one that I liked a lot. And then finally, I got them all together in this, great scene. And ever since, I've never had to photograph steam or bike messengers ever again. So that was a relief. Here's a series of 4. I came to, this is my favorite corner in the city to shoot, the corner of Prince and Broadway in Soho. And I came early to get some great light, and, I really liked this scene. And then this great person kind of walked in and sat down, which worked out really well. And I was able to kind of hang out there for, 15 minutes and photograph. I was photographing, across the street in different ways too, and just kind of hanging out because I was there doing that. And I was there ahead of time. He didn't give me the time of day. He didn't really think twice of me. So it allowed me to kind of shoot for a while and get all these photographs. But it's interesting to think about which one, you like better, which one I like better. I think personally, my 2 favorites are the first and the third. I really was hoping I could get a cool shot with like a lot going on, but I think it's too much and it doesn't work like so well all together. But even though this guy is perfect for the scene, it's I love this background on its own. I just the kind of stillness of it, of this luxury area. So it's not necessary that I like this one better, even though it has the addition of a great person in it. Color, black and white, just quickly. It's obviously a personal preference. It's important for consistency, particularly in projects. There are a few photographers who have done incredible books with black and white and color, and made it work well. I personally can't do that. And I think it's really hard to do. So often I think it's better to keep a, project just in black and white or just in color. But that doesn't mean you can't hop between black and white or color, depending on what you're shooting. Black and white, of course, has a timeless quality to it. Whereas, color can feel more modern. So sometimes I'll flip that on its head, like, with my Lux City project, it's very modern. And so I purposely shot it in black and white because I wanted to kind of take that whole modern feeling and add a, kind of the classic feeling of black and white to kind of, play those two on top of each other, and really make you think about them more. And these days, Fuji, I love what Fuji's doing with their color profiles. So I shoot in RAW, and, when I'm using a color photograph, one of the first things I'll do is I'll go and I'll look through the Fuji's color profiles to pick one that I like. And they have these incredible ones that really help to get back to that great quality that film had. So that actually now color can also feel more classic, because they're doing that. And that's one of the best things that's happened, I think, to photography in a long time. Faces look great in black and white. They stand out even more in black and white. It's not a generalization for all faces, but I think often taking away the color can make a face stand out. And of course, any photo with color distractions that are annoying, you can often solve that by just turning it into black and white. Here's a photograph that I just, I love the difference between, this young woman with, where it's stiff, kind of the stiffness in the body, the muted colors and stuff. And then the flowing red dress, young woman on the iPhone cover. I thought that was really interesting.
Before you move on the black and white,
yep.
Les Gold is asking, do you shoot in black and white or you do saturated in post?
I shoot everything in RAW, so it comes in color, and then I just turn it into black and white, and then work on it that way. Yep. Yeah, it's, when I'm shooting in Manhattan and doing kind of like certain projects, even though I'm shooting in RAW and color, I know most likely like certain things are going to be in black and white. And then when I'm shooting this new project in Brooklyn, I know it's going to be in color, except for the rare, occasion. Here's a shot in Rucker Park, the basketball courts in Upper New York. And here's another moment where I waited for, the look for him to kind of look up and look right at me. And I think that's what made the photograph. So you can see a few photographs here of kids. But I mean, I personally think they're all like amazing and tasteful. I don't feel bad about taking any of these photographs. Here's one that obviously is better in color. But this fits really well with this Lux City project I've mentioned a few times. So it has to be in black and white because that project's in black and white. And it works well in black and white, and it works. But of course, I'd like to show it in color whenever possible. Now, we can actually take if you want, we can take a couple minutes for some more questions if we have some.
I'll keep interrupting you when there's a question.
Okay, we can do it. Okay.
I have one.
Yep.
With COVID, a lot of the stuff that you've and a couple that have snuck through, but most of them are all pre-COVID, it looks like, because I don't see the masks. My question is, now with the masks, are you finding that people are more secure and almost feel like they're hiding behind them and you don't get the same sort of flack that you might have gotten before?
It's people, there's a lot more issue of personal space now. So, I think a longer lens is more important now and shooting people. I don't think it's any different, even though they have a mask. I don't know. It's, people still notice when you photograph and stuff. I've stayed away from photographing people with masks too much because it's, something that kind of depresses me about the city. I like the people in the faces. So it's just, even though it's happening now, I can't wait for it to pass. So I haven't actively went out to photograph people with masks so much, but when I did, I haven't noticed anything too different, except for the fact that you have to give people much more personal space than you did. And I'll talk about that a little bit later with the other project that I'm doing. But yeah, it's going to be a different beast for, the next year or so.
I have two questions. Number one, do you use back button focus? And number two, have you ever done anything in the subways or the trains?
So yeah, I do. I don't do back button focus. It's I've messed around once with it, but I'm just so used to the regular focus that I never really even gave it a shot. So I know photographers love it, but yeah, I don't have I'm not an authority to say if one is better than the other. I just love to do the regular way. The subway, I shoot all the time in the subway. I don't know if I have too many subway or any subway images. Maybe I have one here. I shoot all the time. The subway is tougher because you're closer, obviously. So it's tougher to get comfortable with it. I definitely have a small camera and a silent shutter works really well. And I love shooting in subway platforms. I think it's easier in subway platforms.
There's no issues with shooting in the subways then.
No, the only problem with shooting the subways is, I don't think anyone's ever challenged, anything for the subway shooting, but there's so many books on subway street shooting. You just can't use a tripod.
Yeah, because I'm familiar with the work of Walker Evans with that.
Yeah, and Bruce Davidson is, that's, you're allowed to, I know you're allowed to photograph on the subways without a tripod. And I think it's, it's technically, I don't know. It's sort of public property, but really it's, you're paying, it's the MTA. So I don't know what if it ever came to it, I don't know what the legal thing would be, but it's a huge part of street photography. So yeah, it hasn't up until this point been an issue.
I have a question from Robin Stevens. How do you make money on street photography? And she also adds, thanks, and I'm really enjoying your class.
Oh, I'm very happy about that. So, street photography is I'll tell you the ways I make money are a mixture. I do portraits, events. I do probably with the street photography, the way I make the way I make a lot of my income is I do a lot of private photo tours and street photography workshops, and I do weekend group workshops. So that's I do probably maybe pre-pandemic, I do probably, 4 or so of those a week. So that's a great way, to make a living with this type of work. But, the actual shooting it itself, I do sell some prints of it. The urban landscapes obviously sell more. I think as these photos age and the time kind of, they get older and older, I think they're going to become, a little bit more interesting in terms of people wanting to purchase them. Although they do purchase them now. It's street photography is kind of the center of everything that I do. It's what I love to do. It's how I like to tell my stories. And it's, I think, what my business is built around. But, in terms of actually going out and making a living, it's the workshops would be the obvious way to do it with that. But, I think it's just something, it's for me, it's something that I've always done because I've really liked it. And I just built a business that surrounded it.
And one question here also from David. Do you do portfolio reviews?
I do. Yes. Yeah, I'm going to show my website after. Anyone can email me, for that, or with any questions or anything as well. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'll keep going. If anyone wants to, stop me to ask more questions, we can do that, and we'll do some more at the end. So as I mentioned, street photography without people is very vital to this form of photography. It's underutilized in a lot of photographers because I think they misinterpret street photography as needing to have people in the photographs. But, what's the difference between a street photograph without a person and an urban landscape? And I think the difference is the intention. The intention of an urban landscape, when I do like my urban landscape work, I'm just trying to make things look as beautiful as possible. The goal is to create something to put on my living room wall and look as great as I can, make it great. The goal of a, street photograph without a person is to, share a feeling, work within, something that you're trying to say, help tell a story. There's an underlying goal. Of course, those goals of looking beautiful and everything can crisscross. But I think when you have the intent of kind of sharing a feeling or telling a story, then it becomes a street photograph. And of course, that's all up to interpretation. So here's a photograph, a street I walk down all the time, 6th Avenue. I photographed these buildings a million times. The light, it just never worked. Finally, one day the lighting was just absolutely perfect and it just worked really well. But like this photograph, I don't know how it makes you feel. Like this makes me feel, it's just domineering. It makes, it's kind of how the city can get kind of, get you, give you anxiety, which I definitely have some, if you haven't noticed by my fast talking. And if, just to give you a little more information about me, both my parents are psychiatrists. So I don't know if that says anything else about my work, but yeah, I'm very interested in diagnosing the city and people's personalities and what it does to them. And particularly anxiety and stuff like that is something that kind of shoots out to me when I'm looking at people. Similarly, an image like this has a similar feeling.
While you're drinking, take your break. David says, also adds about the portfolio. He also adds, awesome, love this class. And Dana Richter says the the NYCLU has documents for photographers to carry around. It's all legal. So that's a good source for the rest of us. Thank you very much, Dana.
That's great. Yeah. And I know some photographers who have had issues. I mean, even more so in the UK than the US, that like security guards will stop them and say, you can't photograph. And they'll have some problems that way. And even though it's legal, there are people who don't think it's legal. And if you get into an altercation like that, it's like, I try not to be as confrontational as possible. Because some people immediately are like, oh no, this is totally legal. I'm totally allowed to do this. And that just makes the other person more mad. I try to just be like, oh no, I did not mean to make you uncomfortable. Like, oh, I'm so sorry if I did. And then if they go further and say you got to delete the photograph, if it's a photograph that I don't like, I'll just delete it to just, I'll say legally I'm allowed to do this, but I'm happy to delete this. I don't want to make you uncomfortable. If it's a great photograph, then I would go into more of a conversation about it for sure. But I try to keep it as polite and cordial because, you hear stories of things just, people getting so angry at each other. And a lot of times it doesn't have to happen.
Just 2 quick comments on that. That I know it's in the chat and they're not questions, but many of us have been carrying around the NYPD memo. But Fuat Baran says something very important, and that is, even though it's being legal, it won't protect you from harm. Mm-hmm. And the cops and security guards also illegally try to prevent you from photographing things. You may win a court case, but you may be harmed before that. So I think what you're saying is the same thing as Fuat is saying. Be very careful.
Yeah. Be as as polite as possible. And of course, you actually bring up a good thing. I should add this to my presentation right now is, within the protests and stuff like that, it has become a lot tougher. There's a lot more issues now than there is just walking around, on a normal day. If you're involved in something like that, there's a lot more of a chance that something bad could happen for sure. So that's one of the reasons why just looking spaced out and having a smile on your face
it
I
helps.
was once stopped by a cop for shooting close to a playground. So
Mhm.
be really, really careful with that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah, and I mean, even with that, it's I carry a business card with me and stuff like that. It's yeah, you can definitely, if not get in trouble, you can just cause a lot of headache for yourself, which you don't want to do.
I was stopped in Penn Station once from a police officer from shooting.
Mhm.
So this was right after 9/11.
Oh yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
So
Yeah, I had another experience. I was stopped by a conductor right after 9/11 saying I couldn't photograph. I walked right into the police station and I asked them and they said, no, you can photograph any place you want.
Yeah. Yeah, I think generally police officers know now. There's been, there had been some issues. They know that you're allowed to photograph, protest aside, especially with the importance of tourism to New York. I think they all got the memo that, they got to let people photograph. But yeah, the protests are a different beast. Here's a photograph of Hudson Yards. I won't hold back. I think it's one of the worst developments in New York. This kind of luxury playground, which has no character, completely out of place. But I was walking around it. I find it fascinating. I love photographing there. It's like this dystopian neighborhood in New York. And I was trying to capture a photograph that shared that feeling, looking for different angles. This one I took a zoom lens for, I believe. And really, if you look at this photograph, there's kind of, modern, sleek architecture all over the entire image, but there's nothing in the image. It's a completely empty image. So it might as well be a blank piece of paper. And so that was kind of the feeling that I was going for with that.
Quick question. Do you
Yep.
use autofocus?
I'll talk about focus in a second. Yeah, I'll
Thank
talk
you.
about that very soon. And this photograph is the side of I think it's the Harry Winston store on Fifth Avenue. And it just brought up the whole idea of, when you used to hear about New York, you used to hear, it's a special place. It's unique. Nowhere else is like it. And that's changing. A lot of these cities are becoming kind of more formulaic, and of course it's still unique, but this just brought up the idea of that, seeing all these cities next to each other and how they're, suddenly becoming very similar in certain aspects. This is a photograph of anxiety for me, or how to deal with it. As I sort of mentioned, but this is a really important tip, is to use your eyes instead of the viewfinder. All the work is done with your eyes. And I say that not because I think it's really important to shoot through the viewfinder when you can, although I do kind of shoot from the chin when I need to. Occasionally I'll shoot from the chest if I need to. But when I try to see the scene with my eyes before, I take the shot. When I get my head into the camera, it's such a tunnel vision that I save that for kind of the last moment or right before the last moment. And I try to just keep my eyes looking so I can see other people coming into the scene. I can see what's happening. And I can notice, I think I can notice expressions on people's faces and what's happening with my eyes by looking this way. So, I think it's really important to kind of use your eyes as a viewfinder as part of this, and then put the camera to your eye when needed. Now, zone focusing and focusing in general. So half the time I use autofocus and I use the center point and I just lock on and recompose. I do that I mean, it's a great way to shoot. I do that more with a 50 millimeter, or I do it with a 35 millimeter when I'm when I'm just walking around and not paying attention too much. But I use zone focusing a lot of the time, half the time. And I think it's an incredible thing to do. Zone focusing is the act of pre-focusing your camera to a certain distance. For me, it's typically between 8 and 10 feet. So let's say 9 feet, and turning your focus off. And so that exactly where the focus is set. But if you think about the other factors, say you're using a wide angle lens, a 35 millimeter lens, and you're using a decent depth of field. So you've got like an f8. So if you're shooting at f8, with a 35 millimeter lens, and you're focused at around 9 feet, I'm just making up numbers, but everything from 6 feet to 13 feet is going to be pretty sharp.
Of course, as you get closer to the center, it's going to get really sharp. But that's generally the range that you're shooting in street photography anyway. That's like everything that you see is most likely there. So it really means you don't have to focus anymore. And you can get really good at this. Like this is how I get some of my sharpest shots, is by shooting this way. So I do it with a 35 millimeter more often because, with the 50 millimeter, and as you get more than that, the depth of field, gets a little less. So if you miss the focus, you screw it up more. So I'll do it with a 35 millimeter, but it allows me to just get closer to that kind of purity of, seeing the moment with your eyes, going through the viewfinder and snapping. And it's such a great feeling way of photography. It's like, it's such a Zen thing. You're just not thinking too hard. You're walking, you're looking, you're shooting. And it allows you to have confidence that where the focus is. And it allows you to easily shoot from like the chin too, if you're feeling uncomfortable. So or the chest, if you like to shoot that way. But so when I'm walking around the camera like this, when I can't put the camera to my eye, because I have the 35 millimeter, I know exactly the frame I'm going to get right here. My eyes are just the viewfinder. And I know the focus I'm going to get already. So there's no need to put it to my eye to make sure I'm going to get the focus or anything. I can just shoot it from here. So I think that's a really important thing to practice, pop a wide angle or keep your zoom lens on a wide angle and just try that out. And it works like it's great for walking around. I throw my camera around my neck and, pre-focus it and just let it set. And if I see something, I shoot it. Of course, if you see a scene that's like, it's not an instant thing. It's not like a super quick shot. Like I'll put the autofocus, the switch is really easy to flip. So I quickly will flip it. And if I can use autofocus, I would love to use it because you guarantee you get the focus perfect. But when you're just walking around, most of the moments are just so fast that zone focusing works great.
Speaking of
could you go back to the previous picture for a second?
Mm-hmm.
Could you go back to the previous? Yeah.
This one?
Yeah. Lately, I've been shooting a lot of things that get that reflection like that, and I kind of like it. Could you talk a little bit about positives or negatives of the stray reflections and windows?
Yeah, reflections are tough. I like reflection. It depends. Basically with reflections, I try to stay away from any white things. White cars, like here, there's a white truck, but it's only part of it, so it doesn't ruin it. I find if there's something white, it's going to ruin the shot. But I like making it more complex, like anything that to make reflections often just it's like ornamental. It makes the image look prettier. So I like reflections. Usually though, I try to take them at angles just so I don't get myself in the shot. Right. Yeah, it happens all the time. It's maybe if I was a little bit more like dapper or attractive, I would like my reflection in the shots more, but on the the angles are where I try to do it. But yeah, I think it adds more visual to an image often. But just like that being said, I've had a lot of really good images, like something like this, ruined because the reflection is just like a bright white car and it kind of screws up the photograph. Here's one where I would not have been able to get the shot without zone focusing. So, it was a quick moment on my favorite corner, which is just crazy all the time. People get running around. These two bumped into each other and he just immediately started yelling at her. And it was instinctive. I took the shot. If I had autofocus on, I would have been back focused because I would have focused here. If I had, had the time and thought to, lock onto one of the subjects, I would not have had the time to get back to center, hold it down, get back to center, and then get the shots. So really the instinctive, because I was pre-focused is the only reason that I was able to get this photograph. For this photograph, there's like a Robert Frank Canal Street crowd photograph, which is my favorite crowd photograph of all time. And I spent a lot of time on Canal Street, so I photograph crowds all the time. And I have two that I liked. You saw one previously in color, and this one is my favorite one. But the way that I got this, a lot of waiting and shooting in this corner over the years. But I pre-focused to, this is zone focusing, but instead of picking 8 or 9 feet, I autofocused the camera. I picked the part of the ground where everyone was crisscrossing, and then I turned the focus off. And then, I set the scene up exactly how I wanted. And then I just kind of looked with my peripheral vision as people walked through and tried to get it exactly as everyone came together. And, out of hundreds and hundreds of photographs in different days of doing this, I got one where, everything finally came together.
2 questions for you, please, James.
Yep.
Les Gold asks, is a 35 millimeter on a Fuji X100 like a 55 millimeter full crop? And the second, I'll give you both questions.
Mm.
And do your cameras have a viewfinder or an LCDs panel?
So great question. The 35 millimeter lens on the Fuji is actually a 23. I just say 35 because when I talk about for anytime I talk about a focal length, I'm talking about kind of the 35 millimeter equivalent. So yeah, it's and the 50 millimeter lens is really like a 33, which is like the equivalent of a 50. So yeah, I like just the equivalent of a 35 or equivalent of a 50. And the second question was
Oh, I have to open it. Oh, do you use an LCD or a viewfinder?
Yeah, I use this camera has both. You can switch back and forth between viewfinder or LCD. I like viewfinder more, but yeah, I definitely use LCD sometimes because it's a little bit more exact. But I like the immediacy of the viewfinder, with looking with my own eyes. Yeah, but both are great.
Do you ever shoot outside of Manhattan? Or is just Manhattan that convenient to go to? Like go to areas of Brooklyn, Queens, Bronx?
So, I mean, I do shoot all over the city when I have the chance. I shoot primarily in Manhattan and Brooklyn, but I shoot where I live mostly. I shoot when I travel too, but I'm one of the, there are some photographers that think they do their best work when they travel, and there are some that do their, best stuff when they're close to home. And I prefer doing it close to home. I lived in Manhattan for my whole life, and I've lived in Brooklyn for 3 years now. And so now it's just my work I change it up completely, and I'm shooting in Brooklyn and shooting completely different stuff and really loving it. But I find the fact that, being there every day, even though now in Brooklyn, it's a completely different atmosphere. I find the act of being there every day, it really gives you a chance to kind of create something with a lot of nuance to it.
Have you ever used your cell phone?
Yeah, certainly. When I don't have a camera, cell phone photographs come out great often. The quality is really good these days. I with my 2.5-year-old, I strictly use the iPhone camera, and it's phenomenal. Yeah.
On the LCD versus viewfinder, I feel like the LCD is much less obvious if you're concerned about people being aware.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Especially with the flip screen. Yeah. And I misunderstood the question previously. And I was talking about EVF versus OVF, electronic versus optical viewfinder. When using the back LCD screen, I don't do that too often. There are a lot of photographers that do and do a great job, and you can be very, kind of slick by doing that, like by tilting it out and taking kind of like the Vivian Maher way of shooting. So that works great for a lot of people. I don't usually use the LCD. Yep.
I have a question from Lorraine Piskin.
Mm-hmm.
You seem to use different post-processing with your black and whites, and I'm wondering if that is because it's part of your quote story.
I use the same. I use Lightroom and similar post-processing. So, it's different for each photograph, of course. But no, it's it's dependent on the light, and a lot of the look here is always pretty. It's true to the scene, really. So some of them may look different, but it's just how the scene looked, I think. Yeah. So next is just the thing to keep in the back of your mind is how will an image age? And that goes back to the thing of trying not to take anything for granted. A lot of the times the places we spend the most time in, we take the most granted for. If we were to shoot off to, Portugal or Greece or something like that, everything would suddenly take on this magical quality or this fascinating quality. But it's important to not take, to try to find what's really interesting or not interesting, photograph what's not interesting about where you live as well. It's just to tell some story that is interesting. So try not to take anything for granted. And I did this really with my mailing list, my newsletter. I built up kind of a newsletter of great photographers over the years. And during the pandemic, just to get some inspiration, I did a project called 5 Blocks from Home. And I always gave everyone 2 months and said 75 images that are taken in your home or within 5 blocks of your home. And that was the only criteria. And the stuff people shared was just absolutely, you can see it on my blog. I'll show you where that is. The stuff people came up with was just absolutely incredible. And a lot of people said by having that constraint, it really helped them think in a different way about photography, and it really helped them out. Now, there's the thing about cliches, you know, like the cliches are things that, you know, I think are easy to capture. And something like photographing people on cell phones, staring at their cell phones on the street, can be a cliche, or thought of a cliche. I don't mind shooting cliches. I don't think too much about them. But I do think that anything that, you know, is easier to get, like people staring at their cell phones, like you can get some really good photographs every day going out trying to shoot people staring at cell phones. I think they just have to be that much better or that much more interesting to stand out from the crowd of all of the ones that you can get. So anytime you're shooting something that could be potentially thought of a cliche, you know, it's just important to try to get it as good as possible. So, you know, with images of people on their cell phones, of course, a lot of my work, you know, has people on their cell phones because that's what it is everywhere. But, you know, I have maybe 3 or 4 or 5 that I really, really like out of the however many that I've taken that I end up shooting. And I like a lot more of them. But, you know, the best ones, I think, over time kind of rise to the top. Now, you know, a lot of the black and whites you've seen have already been part of this Lux City project, but now it's all getting into the strictly every photograph is going to be kind of black and white and part of this project that I've been working on that I finished last year. You know, this photograph is obviously a photograph of someone else's graffiti, but I love the message Uber Me Peace, and it fits really well. The project itself, to give you a kind of an idea about it, it's, you know, about the changing nature of New York kind of since 9/11. You know, it's there's the Penny Arcade quote that New York used to be the place where, you know, all the outcasts used to move to, but now it's the place where the 10 most popular kids from every high school around America move to. But it's, you know, the idea, like certain parts of the city, certain parts of Manhattan, there's a lot of, you know, luxurification, wealthier people are moving back, a lot of gentrification. It's kind of the opposite of the white flight movement. A lot of, you know, consumption, conformity you're seeing, a lot of disconnection. And when you notice people, you notice there's a lot, when I say disconnection, there's a lot of loneliness, anxiety, and a different type of anxiety than you used to see. And so that's kind of the gist of what this project is trying to get to. It's really trying to just share that feeling I have when I look around and I see these things happening in the city. And themes and projects. So a project like this, you know, when I started about 10 years ago, and, you know, I started shooting kind of and started noticing these consistencies and areas that I like to go more and what I like to shoot. And at the same time, I started, like, you know, reading more about the subject. So I started reading, you know, about gentrification, about, you know, cities. That's about the time where I got certified as a tour guide, and I got even more involved in the history of New York. And so it was a simultaneous of what I was shooting, but also what I was reading. And I got more and more focused. And, you know, 5 years into the project, I, you know, was able to, you know, put words to it and really put a general sequence. And then 10 years later, you know, I was able to whittle it down to something like 70 images, you know, kind of really know what I was shooting. And as I went further and further, you know, I started, as I knew more about what I was shooting, I came back, you know, each week or each month with better and better and more photographs that worked within the project. I was able to fill in blanks or find things that I wanted to find. Whereas at first it was just kind of shooting around and figuring it out. So that's often the way I like to shoot. Whereas there are some photographers, I'm like, it's amazing you just thought of this project and went out and did it. That's a great way to do it.
I have a question from David.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an advantage to using a zoom lens over a prime?
I mean, you know, it's whatever you're used to. Like a zoom lens, you don't have to move as much. You know, if you don't want to get as close to your subjects, if you'd like to hang around in the same space, you know, often a zoom lens can work great. And there are street photographers who use zoom lenses all the time. You know, for me, I I think using a prime lens, it makes me a lot better of a photographer. But that's just for the way I like to shoot and how I like to shoot. I like to get a little closer and weave with it within my subjects and stuff. And I find a zoom lens slows me down a bit more. But it's, you know, any of these tools can be used in the right way if you kind of find the right tricks to work around them. Here it says, talk to me because I'm lonely. Now, editing and consistency. I mean, we talked a lot about this already in some of the questions, just how I like to use collections. And, you know, the 3 pillars, as I mentioned, it's the shooting that you learned today. Editing is, I love to edit. And a big part of editing is I love to not just have it making the photos look good, but sequencing them. There's the real art form besides the shooting is the sequencing and putting together the stories. So I start with collections, and then I use the book module in Lightroom, and I really lay out kind of the books and the ideas. And I think it's so much fun to do that, like, you know, working towards some sort of idea. So, you know, that's a really great place to play. But I also think that learning about the history of photographers is really important as well, because you find some that shoot in similar areas to where you want to shoot. And you can take the genre in so many different directions. And by looking at different photographers who have done this in different ways, really opens your eyes to the type of shots you can get. And I think it really educates you towards what you should be looking for when you walk up the street. That's just as important as any of the stuff you'll learn here. Here's a photograph. You know, I've been trying to get like a great shot of the crazy vape smoking trend that was happening, just with these huge plumes of smoke. And I was shooting it over and over. And finally, you know, I didn't know what a great shot would look like. It was just, you know, okay, this is okay. This is okay. I don't, you know, I'm not going to use these, but they're okay. And finally, you know, I got the shot I was looking for, which worked really well. I have 2 that I like of vape smoking after shooting it for a few years, this one. And this one's by far my favorite. But it's just, you know, thinking of an idea, like I want to get this and I want it to be good. I don't know how. And just then you keep an eye out for it when you're walking. Here's a photograph of a sample sale in Soho. It's amazing what people will wait in lines for in New York. Filling out job applications. This is why you don't want to come into New York in the holiday season. And also a photograph that we probably won't be able to capture for a year or so. Weird and different images, just something to talk about. You know, a lot of the best photographs in street photography may not be ones that like show up well in Instagram, you know, or like, you know, in your feed or one-offs. You know, you look at the photograph and people will be like, oh, this is great. But in like a book or in like a sequence of images, like those ones that kind of people don't notice in the stream can be the most interesting ones. They can be ones that you stop at and you're like, wait a minute, do I like that? I don't get it. Or, so, you know, don't be afraid of, you know, definitely try to, you know, see how people think about your work in those streams. But, you know, it's most important to what you like and what you find most interesting. And I think so, even if someone seems to disregard it by looking at it one time, I think, you know, in a different venue, in a project, or looking at, you know, taking time with it, I think some of those images are the ones that really will start to rise to the top. So it's important to think about. Emotion and gesture, try to notice with your eyes first. And embrace spontaneity. You know, really, I think there's a gut feeling with this type of photography often. And just, you know, it's important to go with your gut. If you feel it, take the photograph. 99% of the time you'll look through those photographs and be like, you know, what was I thinking? I'm an idiot. But that 1 out of 100 is going to be amazing. And so really your gut knows what it's doing. And so it's important to embrace it. Now, to flip it up, the final small part of this presentation is going to talk about the project I've been working on in Brooklyn. And so what I decided to do is completely switch things up. So I had moved to Brooklyn. I wanted to like shoot in a different way, explore things. I moved to kind of a like quieter, like somewhat more suburban type area. And so I just started shooting, and it's interesting because you'd think that there's a lot less people around, definitely people, but there are a lot less people. And you'd think that having a small camera would be a great thing, and for many it is in this type of areas. But I felt almost a little like too sneaky. Whereas I could blend in, and I feel so comfortable with the small camera. When it's me and another person on the street, I wanted to just be more obvious and more like out there. So I, on one hand, I thought a bigger camera would actually make me feel more comfortable shooting in these environments. So that was one reason why I thought to use the GFX. Also because I was shooting a lot more backgrounds. Backgrounds are a much bigger part of this than the other project. And color. I wanted like a lot of detail, a lot of color. And so this camera was just kind of perfect for what I was looking for. And so that's why I went in this direction. I had heard, I don't know if you're familiar with Alex Soth, one of my absolute favorite photographers. Sleeping by the Mississippi is like one of the most incredible photography books. And, he traveled down the Mississippi River and just met people along the way and took these such intimate photographs with people he had just met. And he said one of the things that helped him do that was that he had a large format camera, and people just saw that and they just immediately thought he was legit. And they just because they saw this big camera, they were like, I'm all in, whatever you want to do. And it opened up a whole world for him. And of course, he's a great talker. He really relates to people, so that helped as well. But it made me in areas where things can be more uncomfortable. I wanted to just be more obvious, just for that same idea. So this one is kind of like I feel like how we're all feeling right now, but this was taken pre-pandemic. And how do you view the world in the areas that you're capturing? What do you think about if you walk down the street or walk in your area where you live? What do you think about it? And how can you put that into photography? So here's one with this type of stuff. And someone mentioned about portraits previously that I said I was going to answer. There's more portraits in this type of environment. I do more portraits because it's harder to take candid photographs. I do take candid photographs. I take a decent amount, I still make it work. But a lot of times I think a portrait is the right way to go. And so this, I came across these two young men, and, it didn't feel right to take a candid shot, walking by. So I said, hey, can I take take a picture real quick? And the guy in the blue hoodie just kind of jumped down and to pose. And I had to say, oh no, stop, go exactly how you were. You guys looked like fantastic. You look exactly how I wanted, how you were. So he got back up, just went exactly how he was, like kind of looked at me a little slightly. So it is a candid kind of feeling, but he is looking at me. And then I got basically the exact shot that I wanted, candidly. And so I'll do that sometimes. I'll stop and say, can I take your picture? But you look perfect how you are. And it allows people to just be themselves, be exactly how they are. And it's a great, it's a great portrait, a great, moment. Sometimes if they're not, maybe perfectly posed or something, I'll tell them I don't pose people. I'll say, can you just stand there in a way that you feel most comfortable? Like, I just want you to be comfortable. And so that really works well because, they're not stiff, they're not, could you lean against this? How just be yourself. And often sometimes I'll ask them questions about themselves, like, about their day or, something, and just the act of, asking them or taking some sort of interest. A lot of times it's quick like this, but, the act of like taking some time to talk to them really makes them think and allows them to kind of get more comfortable with you and gives you like a better portrait. Part of my other projects, I've done some kind of documentary projects. I did a 5-year project stopping people on the street and doing interviews and portraits with them. So I'm not shy about doing that anymore, but it's, I just found that by doing that, by asking them these, recording their stories, I mean, they just opened up and kind of let me into their world by doing that. And it's a great thing to do. I planned on doing that a lot more this past summer. Of course, the pandemic kind of stopped that. So that's going to be on the docket for when I'm able to do that. Here's a photograph of some kids smoking weed behind an abandoned building. I remember walking around and being like, I've gotten a lot of, great background photographs, but, I need a good person. Like it's been a while, and I was just frustrated. And of course, then, I come across this and I'm like, okay, thank you, camera gods. If you haven't been to Greenwood Cemetery, it's the most spectacular, in my opinion, it's the most spectacular place in the city. Everyone should go. It was the second most touristed place in the US behind Niagara Falls until they built Central Park. It's just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful place. Talked a lot about repetition, but I think with around where you live, it's important to do. There's a lot of great front yard displays and things like that in front of houses. I photograph a lot of that. And over time, I hope to, a lot of them are like really good, but I hope over time, the more that I do, I'll end up with a handful of ones that are just like kind of spectacular. This photograph, I personally love it. I don't know why, but I do. I love watching all people on Zoom, all their facial expressions when I show this photograph. Photograph where you live, we talked about. Here's another one. This one was like, it's sort of a portrait. I gave a kind of a quick look, like, can I take this picture? And so the person did exactly the same. So that kind of like quick, like, like, can I take a picture? Works really well. And it usually they don't like do anything. They stay exactly how they are. And similar to this one, like, can I take a picture? And then like a thank you. So like in the city, like in Manhattan, when it's crazy and everything, and I use that small camera, I don't do that like ever. In this area, I do it probably 50% of the time, just kind of a little kind of nod or ask. Now forget it all, be instinctive, be spontaneous, and have fun. There's a ton of stuff that I just talked about, but really it's about enjoying the walk, and it's about going and exploring, getting lost. And a lot of this stuff you can think about when you're editing your photographs, but don't get in your head too much when you're out shooting, because if you do, it can get frustrating. So quickly, before I answer questions, I just want to share my website real quick. So hang with me one second. So I have some resources on here for anyone who might be interested. If the website it's James, Maher photography.com. If you Google James Maher, I'll show up as well. And if you go under the book section, there's under resources, there's a history of street photographers, which this is a great way to get a sense of like different types of photographers. So I split it up into city, urban, American, suburban, and foreign. And below here, I have little write-ups about the photographers. So you can find photographers that you like, say you like Eggleston, or wait, I talked about Alex Soth. So let's click on him. And then I have like write-ups about the photographers with their photographs here. So you can kind of get a sense. It's kind of a cool way to kind of get a history of the photography. If you're interested in cameras, I have a link, the best cameras for street photography, which will kind of go through my opinions. Although there's a lot of great different camera companies for this. I do love Fuji the most. And then I have one, pardon the best, that works for Google, but it's my favorite street photography books. So a whole list of, ones that I think, and this genre is meant for book form. And so I really think it's a great thing to just get a couple of the great books and go through them and just kind of, you see a lot of work from different photographers that you won't see on the internet, and you can see how the sequencing and they play off each other. If you are visiting New York, I have a free New York photographer's travel guide, which you can just download on my site. It'll kind of tell you all my favorite places. It's got a digital map and stuff. That'll help you out there. And then two other things. So I have, if you want to read more about street photography, I wrote this about 10 years ago and then redid it about a year ago. It's called The Essentials of Street Photography. It's 2 books, about 300 something pages. The first book is just really in depth about all street photography things from shooting to editing. The second book is interviews with 8 different street photographers that shoot in different ways and talk about why they shoot that way. So that's a really good way to kind of get a sense of, you know, the ways you can take this genre. And the final thing is I do for anyone who's interested when this pandemic, you know, starts to wane, I do daily, like kind of private one-on-one photography workshops around the city. And I do a handful of group photography workshops. So if anyone's interested, you can check them out on the website or just send me an email. And if anyone's interested in kind of portfolio reviews or talking about, you know, their work, you can just, my email is on the website, but it's james@jamesmaherphotography.com. So I think that's it. I have a newsletter where I do a lot of write-ups on different photographers and such, which you can join from the homepage. So that's everything that's on my website. Let me stop the share. And if anyone has any more questions, yeah.
If you want to try something and stay in Brooklyn, try Brighton Beach, especially under the L there, and the other place is Fort Greene. That's like 2 ends of the world.
That's I love Fort Greene. I have been meaning to go to Brighton Beach, but I haven't spent any time there actually. Yeah.
Go to the boardwalk. You'll
I've heard it's spectacular.
Paradise there.
Yeah, be careful about Brighton Beach. The last time I was there were some strange characters who don't like to have their pictures taken.
You got a problem with the Russian mafia?
Well, there are some strange guys there.
Yeah.
In the group street photography workshops, does a group of people with cameras scare people away or affect your photographing?
Well, it makes them feel famous. No, but it's the way that we do it is it's a big tough thing to deal with. So I'll just give you a quick the group ones. We start with a couple hour presentation each day and then go shoot in different areas. But what we do is we walk from place to place that I really like to photograph in. And I will stop people. What I'll do is we'll stop in a place and we'll shoot for half an hour or 40 minutes in that place and have people split up. And then I'll go around to each person individually. So it allows you to kind of be on your own or with another person. But then we'll kind of come back and go to a different place. So some of it's shooting together. Sometimes that can be a little hard, but there's a lot, at least half of the shooting, if not more, probably more is spent with people split up.
When you were talking early on about the trick of pretending you're taking a picture of a building and then you just sort of, a little interesting story. This weekend I was in the city and I was trying to shoot these 2 guys who were selling fake bags, and this woman was about to buy one of the fake bags. And so I was pretending I was, shooting the building, but the guy, I had a zoom, so I was a ways away from him. The guy starts walking toward me and says, "No, come around and shoot the building from this side."
Yeah.
That's funny. As I was walking by, I just tried to take one from my hip, but I didn't get it.
Yeah. No, those guys, they know when you're taking their photograph for the most part. Yeah.
And can I ask about your tour guide for New York City? How do you do that? And do you use that as an opportunity to photograph? Or are you scouting out places as you go along?
You cut out for that first part of the question?
So how did you get started as a tour guide? And do you use it as an opportunity to shoot while you're actually doing the tour? Or do you use it to scout out places?
Yeah, it's good. So I got started. I mean, as I mentioned, I've always loved history. And I started giving the photo workshops before I became a tour guide official. And, I figured where I'm shooting, it would be really important and for my work as well, but to integrate the history with what I'm shooting. And I thought that would give myself, more intuitively, I know more about what I'm shooting, but when I do the tours, to just kind of bring the areas alive for other people. So that was, it was just kind of a natural transition from what I was doing anyway to focus to get myself to study more different types of history, and then just to take it further. I've like reading about New York history, but both present, I think has been a really important factor in helping me figure out what I like to photograph.
Somebody asked if you would do a workshop specifically for WPS.
Certainly. Yeah.
All right, we'll talk to Serge to work on that. Thank you.
We can definitely talk about it. Yep, for sure. That would be great.
And meanwhile, if the chats, I know you're busy talking, so I'll read them for you. It's just one after another, informative, great presentation. Thank you for the, this was great. This was awesome. So
thank you. Yeah,
you really, great inspiration and great information. So I just want to let you know from all of us who are speaking or not speaking that we've been very impressed.
No,
I'm not stopping the program. I'm just letting you know.
No, I'm very happy to hear about that. And one thing I forgot, we can do more questions if people have them. I'm just going to share my screen to my website real quick. If you go to my blog here, just because I mentioned it, I think it's actually really, this is probably one of the more important things. The first thing is the contest results that I did from this this project. And it's really, I suggest people go through it because it's really fascinating to see I had, I think 3 winners and 3 honorable mentions, and I shared the best photographs from everyone. And it's really kind of fascinating to see the wide variety of things that people came up with. For me, that was like, I learned a lot myself and kind of thought about a lot of different things to photograph. So there's that. Yep. And anybody else have any more questions?
Sure. Have your parents looked at your work, and what do they think of your choice of careers?
My mother thinks I'm wonderful. Yeah.
What mother doesn't think they're wonderful?
Yeah.
Come on now.
Are you
what about your father?
Yes, no, my father too. Yeah. My parents they got into psychiatry because they're crazier than the patients, but they're both great psychiatrists and wonderful people. But, they said, of all the careers they could have thought for me, that was the one thing they couldn't have thought of. So that's why it makes sense. So it made sense to them, definitely. But, and in some way there's a bit of therapy and psychiatry within this.
You genre, have all the earmarks of an only child.
Oh, I know. I have a younger brother. Although he doesn't do much, so
My wife is a social worker. She's retired now, but she does great work if you want a consult.
Okay. I've got my psychiatrist. I'm all set.
Oh, God. Very humble.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I think your unassuming personality would help you greatly interacting with people. They would be comfortable with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's I love working with other photographers. So that's really I feel very lucky to be doing this and all the teaching and stuff too. It really not only is fun to do, but it really helps with my own inspiration as well.
Mm-hmm. Post-pandemic, can we get a workshop with you as club?
Yeah, definitely. We definitely could set one up. Yeah, I would love that. Yeah.
Excellent.
Cool. All right. Well, if nobody has any other questions, thank you. Please, if you think of a question later, just send me an email. Right now during this pandemic, I'm watching my 2.5-year-old full time during the day. So Oh yeah, you have a question?
Yes, there's a question that I wanted to see if you can answer. It was from Tom Osbeck. Is there a legal or social conflict in taking street photos and then putting them in a book and selling the book for commercial purposes?
So no, it's still in a book. It's still like an art book. So it's still meant as an art, it's like a piece of art. So you can definitely sell them in books. Social, it's like, there are photographs that I've taken that are important to my work and the story that, I think the person might not like about themselves. Even in the photographs with that, I'm not like, and the thing that I don't want people to think about some of the work that might be a little critical is that I'm trying to look down on these people or say anything bad about them. I'm connecting to them because I'm also feeling those issues. You know, if I see someone with some jealousy or some of this, you know, I'm connected to that moment and I'm photographing it for that reason. I'm not so the one thing is I don't want people to think I'm making fun of people because that's not the goal. I'm trying to see these moments that, you know, I think are issues, but it's coming from an internal and I'm relating to these people and these moments. But yeah, there are photographs I've taken that I think the people would not like of themselves. And, you know, you just got to come to terms with that.
So
I think.
there's no issue with the lawsuit here then, right?
There should not be based on previous lawsuits. Yeah.
Because Walker Evans didn't publish one of his books, afraid he was going to get sued for years.
Yeah. There was the court case that's the precedent for this is something like what's it? I forget. It's like DeLorca, or what he did was he set up a flash underneath the scaffolding and had a camera, and he would just wait for people to go through the flash, and he would just photograph them. And he had this big gallery show, and you know I think that someone sued him for doing that and for promoting like using the guy's picture to promote the show as well. And the precedent was set that was all legal. Yeah.
Do you think street photography is better on weekdays, weekends, mornings, evenings?
All of the above. I like to switch it up. I think it's important to go to places when they're quiet and go to places when they're busy and try different lighting. That's why I like to go to the same place over and over again. You know, I mean, there are streets with spectacular things that I've walked down, you know, 100 times and still not gotten a great photograph. And then all of a sudden something happens in terrible lighting and it turns to be a great photograph. I love middle of the day lighting. Like you'll ruin a lot of shots because the lighting's not perfect for everything. But when you get a great shot, you know, it's really, really good. Yeah, I don't really have a preference. You know, a photographer like an Alex Webb, if any of you are familiar, like loves shooting the end of the day light and the early morning light. And that's like a consistency in his look. And that a lot of photographers do stuff like that, but I like all times of day and all. Yeah.
Okay. Now,
with those questions in mind, do you post on Instagram or other social media?
Yeah. If you go to my website, you can find my Instagram. I post on Instagram. That's where my work as I take it goes.
Okay.
It's James Maher Photo. Yeah.
I got a question. I'm in Philadelphia, and there's like a real big heroin epidemic here. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but I do a lot of photography here, and I have a technical question because sometimes I go into crack houses to take pictures of people, you know, and document about what's really going on. Definitely. And I know that there is an expectation of privacy when you're inside of a residence. These are abandoned residences that people just creep in, do whatever they want to do. So is that, you know, like potential grounds of a lawsuit if I take a picture of somebody and publish it?
Yeah. Well, first I will say I'm not your lawyer. No, but you know, that's a tough one. I would think because it's an abandoned building, you know, I don't know who owns the land under the building, you know, if anybody owns it or not. But I don't know if you look at like the history of this work and what you're doing. And there's so much of it, even documentary work taken inside of people's places and things like that. So, you know, I think in anything like that, you know, perhaps you do, you know, maybe opening yourself up for the possibility of it. But at the same time, I would say it's probably very unlikely, depending on the situation. So yeah, that's the extent of what I know, but I know what I've seen and, you know, of what people have done and it's being done consistently.
Yeah.
Personal safety is probably a bigger question.
Yeah, certainly. Definitely.
Where in Philly do you shoot?
This is in North Philadelphia, in the Kensington area of Philadelphia.
Welcome to New York.
Yes. I know.
Yeah, how did you find out about us? How did you find out about us?
Oh, I was just surfing online looking for photography courses, and I just happened to come across this website. I said, "Hey, well, you know, give it a shot."
We got trips to Philadelphia.
We did have trips to Philadelphia. Yeah, Eastern State Penitentiary.
Okay, yeah, I've been there.
Yeah.
For Halloween. most of the time.
Yeah.
We've been down to Philadelphia and Pennsylvania several times over the years on field trips. Yeah.
There's a lot of great shooting, in
Yeah.
the downtown area, but there's a lot of things that you'll pick up in the inner city also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was one
Yeah.
night we were down by the water. And that was a fun night because we were shooting and then all these characters are coming by and talking to us, and
The Delaware Bridge, right?
Yeah.
that was by the bridge. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I remember that.
And somebody got a great shot when she fell.
Oh yeah. Forgot about that. I fell down and the camera was on a long exposure and I got this great shot of everything. But Philadelphia is really a great place.
Yeah, if you have that project that you're working on, if it, the photographs are somewhere, I'd love, if you have my email, please send it to me. I'd love to see them.
Okay. Yeah, well.
Decades, but with Sudan's economy and fragile democratic government teetering,
Somebody's TV is on. Please turn that off. Or put yourself on mute. Well, I think is there any other questions? There's a lot of more thank yous. Whoever called out, read out Tom's question, I appreciate it. I had missed it.
Yeah.
And if there's any other questions, otherwise, thank you very, very much. This was absolutely fantastic. And I already sent a note to Serge to work on setting up a workshop for you.
Awesome.
For us.
That's great. I'll definitely look forward to that. And thank you all. These were some fantastic questions. Really fun to talk about all this stuff with everyone.
Thank you,
It was
James.
excellent. Excellent
Thank you
presentation.
so much.
Terrific.
Yeah, have a great evening, everyone. Yeah.
You too.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks. This was great.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, and welcome
Good night,
again
all.
all the folks who came.